What I brought was, I retired 2.5 years ago from the column that I wrote at Wired. And a year ago, just for fun, I came out of retirement and wrote an article about the history of the vibrator. Because I'd been reading a lot about that in my column, and everybody kind of had the same old thing, and they weren't quite accurate. So this is my expurgated version of that article. Excuse me. Oh Joy, an ode to the vibrator, an abbreviated history of machines that go buzz in the night. This new generation of 20-somethings isn't afraid of their sexuality at all, says Oh My Bot founder Suki. They gladly wear it on their sleeve. Or should that be in their panties? Oh My Bod company packages its new club vibe, a bullet that vibrates in response to ambient sound, such as a nightclub DJ or a lover's voice or writers at Writers with Drinks. This bullet is packaged with a goes-with-anything black thong. If I had any sense, I'd be wearing one. The toy debuted at the World Music Conference in Miami to a very enthusiastic crowd. While club kids might not need any social camouflaging to help them feel comfortable with vibrators, they are the first generation to do so en masse. They are only the tail end of millennia of unfortunate misunderstandings about sexuality among medical, religious, and social leaders. Millennia. Vibrators didn't spontaneously erupt in the 1970s. They weren't even a new idea in the late 1800s, when steam and electricity-powered behemoths first appeared in doctors' offices to help physicians treat women for hysteria. To get to the roots of vibrators in Western civilization, we must look to antiquity, early enough that New Testament authors could have specifically banned vibration if they wanted to. Physicians have prescribed vibration for thousands of years, believing that motion applied to the body stimulated circulation and digestion, calmed nervous disorders, and staved off disease and poor health. Robert Noah Calvert, author of The History of Massage, describes instruments developed to extend the physical strength and ability of the person providing the treatment. Instruments that could fit equally well on stockroom.com and massagewarehouse.com. They include a variety of bats and clubs with which to pat the body and thin staves for stroking. He also outlined several ancient Greek vibration techniques that survived well into the 19th century. One method required the patient to travel in a wagon with uneven wheels over rough stone roads. Another placed the afflicted on a wooden plank hung from a tree branch or a crossbar while assistants pushed it to and fro. Riding a horse or mule provided more intense treatment. In fact, for thousands of years, physicians prescribed horseback riding for women and girls suffering from hysteria. At any given point in history, hysteria could mean anxiety, depression, sexual frustration, premenstrual syndrome, ennui, dysmenorrhea, or a number of other conditions of mind or body. I particularly like how Albrecht von Haller, a Swiss physiologist and anatomist who practiced medicine in the 18th century, describes it. Weeping, irritability, depression, mental and physical weariness, morbid fears, forgetfulness, palpitations of the heart, headaches, writing cramps, mental confusion, fear of impending insanity, and constant worry were the most noted symptoms. The most often prescribed remedy for hysteria was marriage. Physicians were not entirely unaware of the connection between physical therapy, genital massage, and sex. Virgins, nuns, and widows might require medical attention, but wives were advised to use an over-the-counter remedy, their husbands. Married women and prostitutes who still felt hysterical were obviously flawed or infirmed and permitted to see a midwife or a doctor. When marital sex was unsatisfying and masturbation discouraged or forbidden, female sexuality asserted itself through one of the few acceptable outlets, the symptoms of the hysteroneurasthenic disorders, says Dr. Rachel Mays in her book, The Technology of Orgasm. Regular medical massage to induce paroxysm might not be every woman's ideal solution, but it was better than getting writing cramps all the time. Some 19th century physicians suggested train travel for women suffering from any of the complaints formerly associated with hysteria, though the term hysteria was finally falling out of favor. The idea was that if you sat a little bit forward, spread your legs just so, the vibrations would enter your body through the train seat and cause all kinds of relaxation and therapy. For these same reasons, other physicians opposed train travel for women, in case this newfangled extreme vibration would have deleterious effects on female bodies. Industrial strength vibration was everywhere at the turn of the 20th century, and it was new. Work formerly performed by human or animal surrendered to giant contraptions that rumbled, shook, and pulsated. People adapted to the noise and motion of machinery, even as they watched it replace their own labor and craftsmanship. The male worry about being replaced by vibrators is not entirely driven by sex. Hysteria treatment still provided a steady source of income for physicians. One American practitioner estimated that by the late 1800s, 75% of the aggregated annual income of American physicians stemmed from frail women. Still, this easy income was limited by the doctor's physical stamina, his tolerance for boredom, and his ability to withstand carpal tunnel syndrome and tennis elbow. You can only manipulate so many hysterical patients in a day. If only there were a machine that can help. Dr. George Taylor's manipulator, introduced around 1870, is the first modern vibrator. Powered by steam, the business end was a vibrating sphere, which the patient snugged up against through a hole in the exam table. Dr. Taylor specifically advised physicians to supervise women when using his machine to prevent overindulgence. Taylor's machine was only the first of many that offered relief to doctors who could treat more patients more efficiently. 10 minutes of machine assist versus an hour of using their own hands made the steep price tags of the machines worth it. A few years later, British physician Joseph Mortimer Granville developed a battery-powered vibrator that came with several vibratodes you could swap out, much like today's multi-headed oscillator. I can't see you, but I can feel the smiles. While Granville intended his device as a musculoskeletal therapy for the men and openly opposed its use in women, his employer, the company Weiss, marketed the machine to physicians worldwide, most of whom did not hesitate to apply it to women. With the arrival of portable models in 1899, however, women were able to take matters into their own hands. The vibrator was the fifth home appliance to be electrified, preceded only by the sewing machine, the fan, the tea kettle, and the toaster. To give you some perspective on the vibrator's place among housewives' priorities, the vacuum cleaner didn't come along for another 9 years, followed by the electric iron and the electric frying pan. Consider that most homes did not yet have electrical outlets, and you really begin to admire the ingenuity that went into these things. The earliest home-use vibrators plugged into a light socket. Nothing as good as regular, socially acceptable visits to gigantic industrial vibrators could possibly last. Sure enough, Sigmund Freud's ravings about female sexuality and the stag films of the 1920s wrecked everything. While Freud pronounced clitoral orgasms as an immature second cousin twice removed of a real orgasm, designed as orgasm caused by a penis in a vagina, early skin flicks showed women masturbating with handheld vibrators on their own, with each other, and with male partners to finish the job. Just think how different the century would have been if John Q. Public had celebrated the admission that paroxysm was orgasm, that women felt sexual pleasure, and that every husband could now have a little mechanical buddy on his team. Instead, the vibrator was whisked out of the medical office and into the boudoir. Women's magazines advertised personal massagers that promised a plethora of do-it-yourself health benefits. They improved life and vigor, strength and beauty. They made your eyes bright and your cheeks pink. You'll smile a lot and look better and be more relaxed and have improved circulation. And all those things are true. In fact, the vibrator completely cured American women of hysteria in just a few decades. The American Psychiatric Association removed the disease from its mental disorders diagnostic manual in 1952. We may chuckle now from our sophisticated place at the dawn of a new era of sexual equity, and yet The only way to sell a vibrator in Alabama today is to make sure the customer has a bona fide medical reason to buy one. And due to length, I have to skip that section. Sorry. But it's true.
Damn.
By the 1940s, the war effort took over the factories and resources that would have been needed to produce vibrators. The 1950s and 1960s saw a return to the massagers, spot reducers, weight loss appliances, and beauty aids of earlier decades. In some cases, the advertising became so coy, women overlooked the full potential of their vibrators. Dr. Carol Queen, founding director of the Center for Sex and Culture and curator of Good Vibrations Antique Vibrator Museum, says that her first vibrator was an ancient one, similar to the 1948 Oster Deluxe Scientific Massage Modality Model M1. She says, I snagged it from my mom's closet. It was the loudest appliance I've ever heard. And in those days before cable, it made the TV signal roll. So I had to use it. I had to use it late at night and when my folks weren't home. I'm sorry to say my mom never asked for it back, which probably means she had never even figured out how great it was to use below the shoulders. Carol describes another vintage favorite as awesome, but very mechanical smelling. I was always paranoid it would burst into flames, though not paranoid enough to stop using it. Only in the 1970s did the vibrator begin to shed the last of its protective coloration, thanks in large part to the outrageous acts of feminists, artists, and, retailers. Focus finally began to shift from female sexuality as a disease paradigm within the heteronormative androcentric model of sex to female sexuality as a normal process and even a basic human right. I'm skipping the 1970s because we were all there. In almost 40 years of sexual exploration through art, film, theater, lectures, and sex work, Dr. Annie Sprinkle has seen the vibrator evolve from a symbol of feminist rebellion to a nightstand staple, taken for granted by the internet generation. Statistics show that women are so much more orgasmic now, she says happily. The information is out there. I'm skipping the 80s because we were all there. I could write an entire book on the influence that the internet has had on sex. In fact, I've written 2. Some of the effects are obvious. Customers can research and shop for vibrators in secret. Women can get paid to orgasm with their vibrators over webcams. Lovers can control each other's vibrators over the internet from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Even though vibration has historically been a healthcare cash cow, only recently have developers begun to target a wider range of people and purposes. Tech-savvy artists and engineers are bringing an advanced sense of design and functionality honed in other industries to vibrator development. Vibrators are also returning to the doctor's office, although this time the doctor is likely to be a woman and a vibrator user herself. Dr. Bathsheba Marcus is the clinical director of the Medical Center for Female Sexuality in New York City. She recommends vibrators for clients who have problems reaching orgasm, as they provide a higher level of stimulation for longer periods of time than a penis, mouth, or hand. It's the same reason doctors used them 120 years ago, she says. The medical center, maintains a pool of vibrators to help women decide which ones to buy. Patients go into the exam room alone, where they try out the vibrators with condoms and see what works best. Usually they pick the strongest ones, but initially those are intimidating. Times have changed, says Laura Sweet, a sales rep at wholesale distributor Honey's Place. Product designers are getting intelligent about biology and functionality, how things are going to fit into your body and actually work, and more care goes into the product. She notes that the Screaming O disposable vibrating cock ring has become one of the best-selling vibrators. It's the cheapest thing out there, and yet it's made of a high-grade silicone. Even clients who only sell the highest-end organic lubricant and the best silicone dildos carry the Screaming O. So does Walgreens. And yet, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Oh My Bod was invited to the prestigious New York International Gift Show in January and put into the juried Accent on Design Housewares section. Suki, the inventor, told me, we were the only vibrator company in housewares. We had all of our naughty bods on little pedestals. One lady came over, picked one up, and asked, "Are these pens?"